The sun was barely visible through the overcast sky as Luke steered his beat-up pickup truck down the winding road outside of town. The air smelled of pine and wet asphalt, and the only sound accompanying him was the soft thrum of his own engine, barely holding together like the rest of his life. It had been a long morning already. A no-show client, an overdue electric bill, and his mother's prescription, still waiting to be picked up at the pharmacy he could no longer afford. Luke sighed, gripping the wheel tighter as if the tension in his hands might somehow straighten out the kinks in his day. Then he saw her. A sleek black sedan sat idling off the shoulder hazard lights, blinking like an SOS in the morning mist. Beside it, a woman stood hunched over the hood, shoulders trembling. She wasn't dressed for the setting. A beige trench coat clung to her frame, soaked from the light drizzle. Her designer heels sank slightly into the soft earth, and she clutched her phone like it was her last lifeline. Luke pulled over instinctively. "Hey," he called gently as he stepped out. "You okay?" The woman looked up startled. Her mascara had streaked slightly, and her lips were pressed into a tight, shaky line. "Don't know what happened. It just stopped. The engine cut out. And there's a no signal out here." Luke approached slowly, his worn boots crunching on the gravel. "Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. He popped the hood and immediately spotted the problem. "Fuel pump shot," he muttered. "These newer models. Fancy tech but fragile as hell." The woman tried to compose herself. "Can it be fixed?" "Yeah, but not here. I can tow it to my garage." "I've got a shop about 6 miles down the road." She nodded absently, eyes distant. "I can't believe this is happening today." Luke glanced at her, then at the car, then back again. "Want a ride? I'm headed that way anyway." The woman blinked at him, suspicious at first, but then something in his voice seemed to steady her. Honest, calm, real. "Okay," she said quietly. They rode in silence for most of the drive. Luke didn't pry, and she didn't offer. But as the truck rattled along, she finally asked, "Do you always stop for strangers?" "Only when they look like their whole world just broke down with the engine," he replied with a half smile. She let out a soft laugh, tired but real. By the time they reached his small garage, the clouds had lifted, slightly casting warm gray light over the cracked pavement. Luke opened the passenger door for her and said, "Let's get you a cup of coffee and figure this out." She followed, still quiet, still watching. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her story, and he definitely didn't know that by helping her, he had just cracked open a door that would change the rest of his life. Luke poured the coffee into 2 chipped mugs, the kind with faded logos from local radio stations and long-gone festivals. He slid one across the counter toward the woman who sat with her coat still buttoned, damp hair clinging to her face. "Not exactly espresso," he said, "but it'll warm you up." She nodded, wrapping her fingers around the mug like it was a lifeline. "Thank you." He watched her for a moment. Something about her posture suggested she was used to being in control, but now she looked utterly adrift. "Don't worry about the cure," he said gently. "Oh, get it towed here and take a proper look once the rain lets up." "You don't have to go out of your way," she said quickly, the words reflexive, rehearsed. Luke shrugged. "I've got time. Besides, no one deserves to be stranded in the rain." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Most people wouldn't stop. I'm not most people." A pause stretched between them. He sipped his coffee and waited. Let her lead. But instead of speaking, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a small envelope. "I can pay you for your time." Luke held up a hand. "Keep it. It's not about money." Her brow furrowed. "Then why help me?" He leaned against the counter. "Because I've been there. Helpless. Alone. You don't forget that feeling, not if you're human." She nodded slowly, her name still unspoken. Her eyes lingered on the floor as if she were ashamed to admit who she really was. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "It's been a hard week, a hard year, really. You don't have to explain. But I want to." She looked up. "I'm Rachel." Luke offered a kind smile. "Nice to meet you, Rachel." "I'm Luke." For a while they talked lightly, cautiously. She didn't reveal much, of vague mention of travel, some stress at work, but nothing more. Still, it was enough to thaw the air between them. By the time the tow truck returned with her car, Rachel stood a little taller. Still tired, still soaked, but grounded by something new, kindness that asked nothing in return. Luke handed her a clean towel and said, Come by tomorrow. I'll let you know what I can do with the car. She hesitated. Are you always this decent? He chuckled. Only on Tuesdays. Rachel smiled genuinely for the first time that day. As she drove off in a borrowed car arranged quickly through a phone call Luke hadn't overheard, he watched her go, wiping his hands on a rag. Just another stranger in need, he thought. He didn't see the discreet security tag on her car's dashboard. Didn't know the last name she hadn't shared. Didn't know that by tomorrow she wouldn't be coming back alone. Rain fell in soft sheets, muffling the usual hum of the roadside and draping the world in gray. Luke stood beside Rachel under the hood of her sedan, which he'd opened again to tinker with the damaged fuel pump. It would take a replacement part to truly fix it, but for now he was trying to patch together something temporary to get it started. Rachel stood quietly next to him, arms crossed, her trench coat soaked through, despite her attempt to stay dry beneath a tree. Her lips were slightly purple with cold, but she didn't complain. You don't have to wait out here, Luke said, glancing over. There's a heater in the garage. I know, she replied, but I don't really want to be alone right now. Luke paused, lowering the wrench in his hand. Yeah, I get that. The moment hung there between them, fragile, unsaid. She took a breath. I wasn't crying earlier just because of the car. He nodded, encouraging without pressuring. I've been under a lot of pressure, she continued, voice soft. Big decisions, people depending on me. And lately I feel like everything's closing in. Luke crouched beside the car, then stood up slowly. It's always the little things that break you, isn't it? Not the pressure, just a dead engine on the wrong day. Rachel laughed weakly. Exactly. I've had those days too, he said, when even the smallest thing feels like the last straw. He glanced at her again. She was shivering. Without a word, he reached into the cab of his truck and pulled out an old, worn umbrella. The fabric was fraying at the edges, one metal rib bent, but it opened wide and still held strong. He walked over and handed it to her. Here, take this. Rachel looked at it, then at him. What about you? I've been rained on before. You look like you've got more to lose from catching a cold. She smiled faintly, accepting it. The umbrella was small for two, but he stood just outside of its reach, continuing his work while she hovered close dry at last. They didn't talk much more. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was shared. By the time he managed a short-term fix and the engine rumbled to life, she looked steadier, calmer, as though something invisible had been lifted. As she got back into the borrowed car and rolled down the window, she asked, Do you always help strangers in the rain? Luke grinned. Only the ones worth remembering. She didn't say anything more, just looked at him like she wanted to, then drove off. That night, Luke went home soaked and tired, not thinking much of the encounter beyond the satisfaction of having helped. But across town, Rachel sat in her penthouse suite, the umbrella still in her hand. She stared at it as if it were a relic. And then she picked up her phone. Find out everything you can about a man named Luke Callahan. Luke pushed open the creaky front door to his house as quietly as he could. The porch light had burned out days ago, and he hadn't had the money or time to replace it. The hallway light flickered when he turned it on, revealing a cramped living room where second-hand furniture sat in the shadows of quiet sacrifice. From the back room came the sound of soft coughing. His mother. Luke, a voice whispered. His younger sister, Ellie, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was barely 18, but her eyes carried a maturity well beyond her years. You're late, she said, not with accusation but concern. Car trouble, he muttered, setting down his bag. Someone else's. I stopped to help. She raised an eyebrow. Did they at least pay you? He gave a faint smile. No, but it felt right. Ellie sighed and handed him a plate. A single boiled potato cut in half and a few beans. This is all we've got until Friday. Luke accepted the plate without complaint. Thanks, Elle. How is Mom sleeping now? She was in pain earlier. Luke walked down the hall and peeked into the dim room. His mother lay curled beneath an old quilt, her breathing shallow. Medical bills were piled up in the corner, unopened. He returned to the table and sat across from Ellie. You ever wish things were different, she asked quietly. Every day, he admitted. But wishing doesn't feed us. They ate in silence, the kind of silence filled with quiet resilience. They didn't need to talk about the overdue rent or the school supplies Ellie needed, but wouldn't ask for. It was all there unsaid, but understood. After dinner, Luke washed the dishes while Ellie prepared a warm cloth for their mother. It was their rhythm, flawed but steady. Later that night, he sat by the window with a notebook and a pencil, sketching ideas for an auto lift system. He'd been dreaming about something that could help him work faster, save time and energy. Maybe one day sell the design. He thought briefly of Rachel, the umbrella, her eyes when she smiled. And then he looked back at his house, faded, cracked, but still standing. He may have come home with less, but he had something too many others didn't, a reason to keep trying. The knock came at precisely 800 a.m. Luke was still buttoning his shirt, half awake and bleary-eyed from a restless night. Ellie peeked out the window first and froze. "There's a limo," she whispered, "and 12 people, all in suits." Luke frowned, hurrying to the door. As he opened it, he was greeted by a wall of pristine professionalism, 12 sharply dressed lawyers' briefcases in hand, standing in a neat semicircle like an elite task force. "Mr. Luke Callahan," the lead woman asked. Yeah." She stepped forward and extended a polished business card. "My name is Clara Wren. We represent Ms. Rachel Whitmore." Luke blinked. "Rachel, the woman from the rain." Clara nodded with a slight smile. "Ms. Whitmore wishes to express her gratitude for your assistance yesterday. She regrets not revealing her identity at the time, but under the circumstances, discretion was necessary." "Who is she exactly?" Luke asked, heart thumping. Clara's tone turned reverent. "Rachel Whitmore is the CEO and majority owner of Whitmore International, one of the top 10 private companies in the country." Luke's mind reeled. "She's what," Ellie whispered behind him. One of the other lawyers stepped forward and opened a slim leather folder. "Mr. Callahan, we're here to discuss 3 matters. First, Ms. Whitmore has instructed us to clear any outstanding debts under your name. Second, she has secured a consulting opportunity with a generous advance. And third, she has requested to meet you again, privately." Luke leaned against the doorframe. "Is this real?" Clara handed him a sealed envelope. "Inside, you'll find the full details along with a personal letter from Ms. Whitmore." He stared down at it, hands trembling. The same woman he'd offered his umbrella to. The one he'd helped without asking a single question. Now she was changing his life. The lawyers turned to leave one by one. Clara paused and added, "She said to tell you kindness has a way of circling back." As the limousines pulled away, Ellie clutched his arm. "Luke," she whispered, "what did you do?" He could only shake his head, still stunned. "I gave someone my umbrella." The following day, Luke received a formal invitation printed on heavyweight paper with gold-embossed lettering. It asked him to meet Rachel Whitmore at her corporate office, Whitmore Tower, in the heart of the city. Ellie stared at the card as he packed a clean shirt and borrowed tie. "It feels like something out of a movie," she whispered. Luke wasn't so sure. His stomach was tight with nerves as he rode the elevator to the top floor. A receptionist led him through a sleek, glass-walled office space that buzzed with quiet efficiency. When Rachel stepped out from behind a marble desk, she looked different, tailored power suit, heels, hair pulled back. But her smile was the same. "Luke," she said warmly, "thank you for coming." He nodded. "Wasn't sure I had a choice." She laughed. "You always do. I just hoped you'd say yes." They sat in a minimalist conference room overlooking the skyline. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said. "Not just for fixing my car, but for showing me something I'd forgotten existed." Luke stayed quiet. "I run a global firm," she continued. "Billions in revenue, thousands of employees. But lately I've felt disconnected, like everything I touch is calculated. But your kindness wasn't. It reminded me what authenticity looks like." She slid a folder toward him. "Inside is a consulting position, your name on it. No interviews, flexible hours, full benefits, and a signing bonus that clears your family's debts." Luke hesitated, barely touching the folder. "Why me?" he asked. "You don't know me." Rachel looked him straight in the eyes. "I know enough. You helped someone without knowing who they were. That's the kind of person I want around me." He looked down at the papers, heart pounding. "I don't want charity," he said. "I want to earn my way." "You will," she replied. "This is just a door. What you do with it is up to you." Luke leaned back, torn. It felt surreal, too fast, too much. But something in her voice told him she wasn't offering pity. She was offering partnership. He finally met her eyes and nodded once. "He'll think about it," Rachel smiled. "That's all I ask." As he left the tower briefcase in hand, he didn't yet know that his decision would mark the beginning of a journey neither of them could predict. Luke sat on a park bench later that evening, the job offer folder unopened in his lap. The sun dipped low behind the skyline, bathing the city in warm golds and soft shadows. He didn't doubt Rachel's sincerity. What he doubted was his place in her world. The next morning, he returned to Whitmore Tower unannounced. Rachel was surprised to see him. "Didn't expect you back so soon." "I've read everything," he said, placing the folder gently on her desk. "It's generous. Too generous." She tilted her head. "It's deserved." He shook his head. "I don't want handouts. I want to earn what I receive. Not because I'm proud, because I want to prove I'm worth the investment." Rachel leaned back, studying him. "So what are you asking for?" "Not charity," Luke said. "A chance, a job, any job. Let me start where I'm qualified. I'll work my way up like anyone else." There was a pause. Then slowly Rachel smiled. It wasn't amusement, it was admiration. "You'd take a janitor's position before taking a directorship, if that's what it takes," he replied. "Give me a role with real expectations. If I fail, I walk away with no regrets." She stood and walked to the window, arms folded. "You know how rare that is," she asked, "to see someone turn down comfort in exchange for accountability." He stayed silent. "You remind me of someone I used to be," she said quietly. Rachel turned back and offered her hand. "There's a position in facilities maintenance open. Entry level, night shift. It's tough." Luke took her hand. "Perfect." As he walked out of her office, paperwork in hand, Rachel watched him go, curious, intrigued, and for the first time in years, hopeful. The job wasn't glamorous. Luke swept floors, hauled supply crates, and fixed jammed copier machines. Most employees barely acknowledged him. A few smirked when they passed. One group of junior executives snickered behind their coffee mugs. "That's the guy the CEO brought in. What's he even doing here?" But Luke kept his head down and worked, not to prove them wrong, but to prove himself right. He arrived early, left late. He remembered everyone's names, repaired what others ignored. When the elevator jammed one morning, it was Luke who noticed the electrical fault, reported it, and even helped the maintenance crew. Curiosity began replacing mockery. In the break room, a quiet woman from HR named Lila asked, "Why are you here, really?" Luke smiled. "To build something, even if it starts with a mop." One afternoon, Rachel visited the floor unannounced. She watched from a distance as Luke showed a new intern how to reset a network printer. "He's different," said her assistant. Rachel nodded. "That's why he's here." The trial period was supposed to last 2 weeks. By the end of the first department, heads began requesting Luke for odd tasks, then small projects. He never refused and he never complained. When someone's office was flooded after a pipe burst, Luke helped rescue paperwork all night. That person turned out to be a senior director. One evening, as Rachel reviewed reports from multiple departments, she noticed a trend: Luke Callahan kept showing up. Not in complaints, only in commendations. She smiled, tapped her pen on the desk, and whispered, "Good." The test hadn't been announced, but Luke had passed it anyway. Luke wasn't flashy. He didn't seek the spotlight. But what he had couldn't stay hidden for long. When the office coffee machine refused to work for the third day in a row, Luke didn't just reset it. He disassembled, cleaned, and rebuilt the faulty heating coil with parts salvaged from old supply stock. The staff called it a miracle. Luke called it common sense. That same week, the logistics floor faced a scheduling jam. 2 key deliveries misaligned due to a software glitch. While IT scrambled, Luke with a pen and paper redrew the delivery flow and rerouted drivers using only handwritten notes and timing estimates. Everything arrived on time. Executives noticed. Lila from HR approached him with curiosity. "Where'd you learn to do all that?" Luke shrugged. "You fix enough things when no one else will, you get good at it." But it wasn't just mechanics. Luke had a way of reading people. He noticed when the night security guard was limping and quietly brought him a compression wrap. He saw when a junior analyst stayed late, overwhelmed, and sat with her over lukewarm noodles to walk through her spreadsheets. "He doesn't act like he's above anyone," one employee murmured. "And yet, he makes everyone better." By the end of the month, senior staff had compiled an unofficial list of improvements. Luke had spearheaded: repairs and morale boosts, time saved. Rachel reviewed the list herself. "He sees what we miss," she said aloud. "Not just problems, people." That night she sent an email, Luke Callahan, internal review, high priority pathway. He had no idea. He just showed up the next day ready to work. Luke's rise didn't sit well with everyone. One in particular, Marcus Hale, a former associate of Rachel, an ex-head of special operations, took notice. He had been quietly pushed out a year ago after multiple ethics violations. Rachel's leadership ushered in a new era, and Marcus hadn't forgotten it. Seeing Luke's name on internal memos triggered something in him, envy. He's a janitor with a lucky break, Marcus muttered in a private conversation with a board member. He doesn't belong at this table. When subtle comments didn't tarnish Luke's name, Marcus took darker steps. One morning, Luke was called into HR. Someone had submitted a complaint anonymous, accusing him of falsifying maintenance records and accessing restricted systems. Luke's heart sank. He hadn't done any of it. But the weight of accusation felt heavier than truth. Rachel was informed. She requested a personal review. The investigation uncovered the truth quickly: security logs, badge swipes, timestamps. Luke had done his work and more, but nothing inappropriate. If anything, he had gone above and beyond. Marcus's fingerprints, metaphorically speaking, were everywhere. Rachel confronted him. Why sabotage him? As a distraction, Marcus replied. People are too busy romanticizing his story to focus on reality. Rachel's voice was cold. Reality is he's done more for this company in 3 weeks than you did in your final 6 months. Marcus was escorted from the building. Again. Luke never asked what happened. He simply returned to his shift more determined, more humble, and in the eyes of the company, more respected than ever. Because when storms rise, true character stands firm. The office lights dimmed for the late evening hour, and only Rachel's private suite remained fully lit. Luke was surprised to be invited in after hours, but her tone had been warm, insistent. She gestured to a worn photograph on her desk. A man in oil-stained coveralls smiling with his arms around a young girl. My father, she said. He was a mechanic, raised me on his own. Luke blinked. You never mentioned. I never thought I'd need to, she said, folding her hands. But you reminded me of him. The way you speak, how you treat people, how you'd rather do right than be seen doing it. Rachel's voice softened. I know what it's like to go to bed hungry, to watch your parent stretch $1 like it was made of magic. My father gave his last meal to someone more desperate than us once. I never forgot that. Luke's throat tightened. He hadn't expected this. Her story mirrored his in ways he couldn't have imagined. You didn't just help me that night in the rain. Rachel continued. You woke something up in me, something I had let get buried beneath profit reports and power suits. She stood and stepped closer. That's why I sent the lawyers. Not just out of gratitude, but to make sure your story didn't vanish in the rain, like so many others. Luke looked down. I didn't do it for anything in return, I know, she said. That's what makes you worthy of everything I want to offer. For a long moment, the room was silent, save for the hum of the city outside. Two lives, once strangers, had collided by fate and found in each other an echo of something long lost. Rachel smiled. You reminded me who I am. And Luke in that moment realized he might just be stepping into a life bigger than anything he'd dared to dream. Just as Luke began settling into his new role, the company faced a crisis. A major contract worth millions was found to be based on faulty data, the result of an ambitious executive rushing results and ignoring warnings from internal review. Panic rippled through the upper floor. Rachel called an emergency board meeting. Luke, now a trusted advisor in operations, was invited to attend. Many didn't expect him to speak. He wasn't one of them after all. But when the presentations finished and blame started flying, Luke stood up. With respect, he began, you don't fix this by saving face. You fix it by telling the truth to the client, to your team, to yourselves. A silence fell. He continued outlining a step-by-step plan that took ownership of the mistake while restoring client confidence through transparency, speed, and accountability. Sometimes integrity costs you, but it never bankrupts you, he finished. The room sat still. Then one board member leaned forward. Do you really believe the truth will be enough? Luke nodded. If it isn't, then we're not the company I believed we were becoming. Rachel sat back, a small smile on her lips. The board approved the plan unanimously. The client, impressed by the honesty and rapid action, chose to stay. And Luke's reputation within the company was no longer quiet inspiration. He had become a leader. One not forged in corner offices or Ivy League programs, but in broken engines, borrowed umbrellas, and toast shared at empty tables. Weeks after the boardroom victory, Rachel summoned Luke once more, this time to the company's top floor. There wasn't a presentation, no board members, just Rachel and a simple envelope. "You've earned this," she said, sliding it across the desk. Inside was a formal offer: Director of Talent Outreach and Development. A new title, a new role, a chance to build pathways for people like him, smart, overlooked, honest workers who never got the break they deserved. Luke stared at the letter, then at her. "Why me?" "Because you don't want it for the title," she replied. "You want it for the change it can create." The job wasn't about suits or prestige. It was about walking into shelters, trade schools, and night classes and saying, "You belong here too." Luke accepted. In the months that followed, he mentored dozens. People who never thought they'd sit in a boardroom learned how to build engines of opportunity, not just machines. He still wore his work boots, still fixed things when he saw them broken. But now he also helped fix lives. And whenever someone asked him how he got started, he'd simply smile. It began on a rainy night with a stranger in a broken-down car, because the smallest acts can drive the biggest changes. Luke stood beneath the bold, clean sign, Unity Garage. It stood where his father once worked, nestled in the heart of a neighborhood long forgotten by the city's developers. The garage wasn't just a repair shop, it was a dream realized. Thanks to seed funding from Rachel's firm, the space was outfitted with cutting-edge diagnostic tech, 3D printed tools, and a training annex for apprentices. But Luke had insisted on one thing: the chairs in the waiting area still came from his old kitchen. He wanted it to feel like home. Kids who once saw nothing beyond the block now filed in for mentorship sessions. Adults with prison records or no formal education learned how to run electric diagnostics or write customer estimates. Luke taught them all, not just how to repair engines, but how to rebuild belief. Rachel visited the opening day quietly, standing in the back, letting Luke have the spotlight. He gave a short speech, voice shaking with emotion. "We don't just fix cars here," he said. "We fix futures." As the crowd applauded, Luke caught Rachel's eye. She nodded. From a broken-down night to a garage full of purpose, every turn in Luke's story had led here. And it was only the beginning. A year had passed since Unity Garage opened its doors. It had become a local landmark, part community center, part miracle. Luke was in the middle of teaching a group of teens how to rotate tires properly when he noticed the sleek black car pull into the lot. It wasn't the kind of car that usually stopped here. The hood popped, steam hissed. Rachel stepped out, a faint smile on her lips. Luke walked over, eyebrow raised. "Really?" "Again." She laughed. "You caught me. Thought I'd recreate a moment. It's been a while." He looked under the hood. Nothing wrong, of course. She had just needed an excuse. They sat together on a bench in the garage's front yard, sipping coffee from paper cups. The sun was setting, casting gold across the sidewalk. Rachel looked around. "You've built something beautiful here, Luke." He glanced toward the garage where laughter and the sound of tools filled the air. Not alone, thought. They sat in silence, not awkward but full. The kind shared by people who've been through something and come out better for it. Rachel stood. "I should go. Just needed to see it with my own eyes again. And remind myself that sometimes a breakdown is the best thing that can happen." Luke watched her leave, a smile pulling at his lips. Some stories don't need endings, just returns. On the wall of Rachel's expansive corner office, beside awards and company milestones, hangs a framed umbrella. Guests often ask about it. She tells them the story at conferences, at dinners, during mentoring sessions. She always begins the same way: "I was standing in the rain, broken down in every sense of the word. He didn't know who I was. He didn't ask. He didn't fix my car that night. He fixed something bigger." It became part of her keynote on leadership: the power of humility, the strength of quiet kindness, the value of people over profit. And in a little garage downtown, Luke doesn't know that CEOs quote him. He's too busy showing a student how to change oil properly, reminding them that attention to detail is a kind of love. The umbrella, tattered and once forgotten, now shelters a legacy, because it was never just about the car. It was about being seen, and seen he was.